Hello and welcome. It's time again for another edition of the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, and today we're going to take a look at dreams. This is always a fascinating subject in the paranormal. People want to question their dreams, understand their dreams. Are we communicating with the dead in our dreams? Are we astral projecting and physically leaving our bodies at some point during a dream? Well, that's what we're going to discuss tonight and so much more with our guest. Our guest is Dr. Michael Lennox. He's a practicing psychologist and one of the most respected and sought-after dream interpreters in the USA. He has appeared on SyFy, MTV, and has published articles in Today's Woman, TV Guide, and many other magazines. He has a brand new book called Llewellyn's Little Book of Dreams. It's a pleasure to have you join us tonight, sir. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
What fascinates you about dreams that this was a subject and a topic that you wanted to cover in book form?
Well, I mean, it starts with my childhood because I, just like anybody else, I had dreams as a kid, and one in particular that I had as early as 3 years old that I still remember, that was a very abstract kind of dream of just being in this empty kind of landscape. And I was aware that above me was something really enormous, and kind of below me or inside me, there was something really, really tiny. And the dream was terrifying. It was just a terrifying, nightmarish. Now, today I understand that to be a dream of infinity. But to my 3 and 4 year old mind, it was just a terrifying place to be. And I think that imprinted in me a healthy sort of fear, fascination, respect, and love for the dream experience. And I just followed that through my life, and it led to where we are today.
How seriously do scientists take the study of dreams?
That's a fascinating question to be asked right at the top of a show like this, because one of the things that makes me a little bit crazy about the scientific community and dreams is there's so many advancements being made in neuroscience and brain structure and brain chemistry these days. Certainly in the last decade and a half has really just flooded the scientific community with really wonderful awarenesses about what's going on in the brain during sleep, both structurally and chemically. And one of the natural sort of artifacts of that in the scientific community is we now know acetylcholine and the inhibition of it relates to the dream, sleep, and REM, blah, blah, blah. And therefore, dreams have no meaning, which is ludicrous. There's nothing about confirming certain brain structures activating in the dream state that then ipso facto means that dreams don't have some sort of a spiritual or energetic or powerful transpersonal meaning. It's simply just saying what the brain is doing while the soul is having its sort of, expansive experience. So I think that in the neuroscientific community, they seek to understand the structure of what's going on with dreams, and therefore they shy away from what might be happening in a more mystical perspective, which I think is a shame.
Right, because mystical you can't scientifically test and show principles of repeatability, right?
So absolutely, right. But
that becomes our problem.
I'm a walking empirical study to the validity of dreams.
Now, I find it fascinating, too, that we look at this study and, we've mapped the brain, right? You know which section of the brain is more creative or artistic or mathematical. We know many of these aspects. And I'm just wondering, do you know from any studies, Dr. Lennox, are there parts of our brain that we access only during dream state that do not fire up or activate during awake?
Well, nothing that is endemic to only dreaming, but it is interesting, and I don't have my notes in front of me, so I can't quote into this material with great, authority, but I assure you, let me put it in really basic layman's terms. Visually, let's just go with the visual element of dreams, because certainly that's one thing that everybody can agree upon, that dreams are incredibly visual. However, the visual cortex that we use when we're awake, when our eyes are open, is not what's firing during the dream experience. So though we are seeing with incredible vividity, clarity, we are not seeing in the same way that our eyes register what we see in our waking life. And that's a brain structural phenomenon that is sort of sets dreaming and waking apart very distinctly.
Wow, that is fascinating. How about the auditory aspect? I've had dreams that are very vivid, very bright. I can smell, I can feel the breeze, I can see the colors detailed, but it's muted. It's like I'm watching a silent movie unfold in front of me. Is that an issue with the brain? Is it trying to process all of the other elements and hyper elements that I'm experiencing, and sometimes we lose bits of other senses?
Well, when you look at it from the perspective of, well, what's the brain up to? There's a primary function that's happening during REM sleep, several primary functions that are not storytelling functions, if you will, though dreams do have this narrative that we experience. The primary function in REM sleep is twofold. One has to do with metabolic waste. The brain is cleaning, the brain poops just like anything else. There's cells make energy and discharge waste. And so there's metabolic waste. And this metabolic waste has to be gotten rid of, and it cannot be gotten rid of in the same way that happens in the body below the brain, which is done through the lymphatic system, because there's this thing called the blood-brain barrier. We can't actually flood the brain in the same way that the body floods with lymph and all kinds of fluid through the lymphatic system to get rid of waste. So there's this phenomenal thing that occurs that the brain cells actually shrink, and the space between them gets wider and fills with cerebral spinal fluid. And then when the brain cells regain their original shape, they're literally squeezing that cerebral spinal fluid out of the brain and taking with it the metabolic waste that the brain has created during the waking sort of experience. And if we did not do this, when we do not do this, that presence of all that metabolic waste retains in the brain as stimulating material. And this is why someone who is sleep deprived for 2 or 3 nights will begin to hallucinate, because they're responding to stuff that's not actually happening outside themselves, but stuff that's happening inside the brain in the form of metabolic waste being present in the brain cells. That's a primary function of REM sleep. And another one, which is less codified in terms of the structure of it, is the formation of short-term memory. That's one of the reasons why dreams are so often feature elements of the day's waking life experience, is because we're reviewing everything, and in a very simplistic way, we're sort of going over everything we've looked at, felt, touched, smelled, and tasted during the day, and deciding what's important and what's insignificant. And everything that's insignificant is sort of cast off into some abyss of the unconscious, and everything that's considered important is retained in the form of short-term memory. So think about it. You've got a narrative of a dream that we've already decided is a mystical experience. And in that mystical experience, there are vague senses of touch and taste and smell and sight. But in a very fundamental way, the brain is actually reviewing everything that it vividly tasted, touched, and smelled during the day to make these decisions. And I think that those experiences cross the boundaries as well, so that in the mystical narratives that our unconscious mind is throwing up for us to experience and express, we are also experiencing taste and touch and smell and stimulation that would be vivid if we were awake.
I've spoken about it on the show before, and you brought up the sleep deprivation angle. And that's fascinating to me because that answers so much. I had told the story, but I'd love your take on the different aspects of this, if you don't mind. I had gone a number of days. I want to say it was close to 3 days with almost no sleep. I just could not sleep. I would catch like 20-minute power naps, and that's it. And they were few and far between. And I was in sales at the time, and my boss heard me, and my goal for the month was like 25 appointments, and I set 20 in the day before lunch. And they were standing behind me to make sure I wasn't fudging the numbers, I wasn't misleading the clients to get these sales. They were trying to figure out what pistons I was firing on. And as they're listening to me, they notice that I've bent my pinky in, and I'm slowly taping my pinky to my palm. And at first you're thinking, okay, he's just bored. He's, doing this. And after a bunch of calls, finally my manager, Kent, leaned over, tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "Hey, come here for a second." He goes, "You're really burning it up. What are you doing today?" I said, "I don't know. I just, things are firing. Perfect." And here's a weird thing, Dr. Lennox. I have conscious memory of all of this occurring. Even this part. He goes, what are you doing with the tape there, Dave?" And I looked at my hand and I said, "Well, I haven't been sleeping much lately, but I fell asleep for about 20 minutes yesterday. And while I was asleep, somebody removed my pinky and replaced it with this one. So when I get home, I'm going to cut it off." And he looked at me and kind of laughed and he said, "What?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, this whole section, and it was like my pinky all the way down to the hub of my palm. I said, "This isn't mine, but it'll go when I get home." And Kent walked in to talk to our other manager, who then came out. And it's funny because they've told me after the fact they were really debating, do we stop him because he's on a tear and he's in a zone nobody's been in, but he's selling like mad. And they're listening to these calls again to make sure I'm legal. Everything's on the up and up. I was just in this incredible zone. And then they finally took me aside at lunch, started talking to me. They brought me into the owner's office. The owner's like, "Just leave him alone. Let him do his job." And they're like, "No, you have to hear this." So when I started to describe to Dan, my boss, the owner, that this part of my hand didn't belong there, I was going to cut it off. I remember the feeling, Dr. Lennox. I remember this not feeling like part of my hand. It was like somebody had replaced it with a rubber prosthetic. But everything else was perfectly fine. I could carry on conversations. I wasn't rambling. I wasn't speaking incoherently. Everything else was clear. The conversation was clear. I remember them talking, and then they said, my boss was like, "You've done a great job. We're going to let you go today early. And because you did such a good job, we're going to give you a drive home. We're going to buy your lunch." And I remember he said something along the lines of, "And do me a favor, hold off, just get some sleep. And if that finger hasn't been replaced by then, I know a good doctor that'll take it off and get your original finger back." And it all made sense. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay, Dan, I trust you." They took me home, dosed me with NyQuil, dosed me with Benadryl, and I slept for 2 days. But how could I consciously, and today this is a very strong memory for me, how is it that to me it made complete sense that this finger did not belong on my hand, and yet I was cognizant and functioning on all other levels just fine.
Yeah, and if I had if I was a neuropsychologist and I had the real thorough knowledge of brain structure, chemistry, and functioning, I might be able to describe technically what was occurring for you. That is definitely beyond my ken, but I will start with the notion that as you tell this story, it lands on me as an of course. Like, that is the beauty and the nature of the mystery of what consciousness itself is that makes dreaming so profound, is that there's this other perspective, this larger mystical perspective that we tap into in our dream state. It's not the other way around. People think, we go into a dream perspective or a dream state. I don't believe that that's what it is. I believe that what it is the rational mind that we think with it's an orientation machine. It orients us to time, space, and identity. And it does it primarily through memory. I remember who I am. I remember what I do. I remember what my life is. I remember where my job is and what I'm, supposed to do today. Then when that part of us goes to sleep, if you will, the larger perspective, the unconscious mind, the mystical realms open up to us completely. When you have this experience of sleep deprivation, your waking mind was fully present, so you were oriented to time and space and identity, but you weren't clean enough in your brain. Your brain wasn't clear enough because there's all this metabolic waste floating around in your brain cells, and so it wasn't operating with the lid on tightly enough so that a dream consciousness, a vivid dream idea, gets incorporated by the waking mind that's oriented to identity.
So it was coexisting in awake and dreaming.
And
fascinating.
Baby, your finger had been replaced.
It sure was. I'm glad I got the original one back.
Well, thank God that somebody's holding on to it and that your employers sought the better of.
Yeah.
I also think it's fascinating. I don't know that this relates to dreams so much as it relates to the unconscious mind. I don't want to get too far afloat, but, the art of selling is to see the conversation beyond the conversation.
Right.
I was in sales 1,000 years ago. Thankfully, I wasn't a salesperson because I sucked at it. Why? Because in my world, as a budding, I wasn't a psychologist then, or I wasn't a spiritual teacher that I am now. This is 20 years ago. But in my world, no means no.
Right.
Oh, I want you to buy 50,000 units of showgirls for me. I worked for MGM. Oh, I don't want to buy that many. It's like, oh, no? Okay.
Right.
The art of selling is to see beyond that experience. And so there's something sort of unconscious going on in your experience of selling. And I think that you were firing on all cylinders in a way because your unconscious mind was operating beyond the limitations of anything that anybody might have been saying to you in your interactions, which was allowing you to function in this phenomenal, outrageous way.
Is that we talk, and we've mentioned in the show before, when we're having a lot of people will have these paranormal experiences coming in or going out of dream state. These are the hypnagogic, hypnopompic states. Was I in a waking form of like a hypnopompic or hypnagogic state? I can't remember which one is which, but was that kind of it? I was functioning in between those two zones?
If you understand that state, let's talk about that for a moment. Similar, what you experienced is something that there's not a lot written about. This is the first time I've ever heard anything quite like it. So it's not as if, and with hypnopompic and hypnagogic hallucinations, you can always remember this. Pomp and circumstances is what they play at graduation, and that happens when you're done with school. So hypnopompic hallucinations happen after sleep, and hypnagogic happen before sleep. Same thing, though, before or after. You slam into REM sleep, but your conscious mind stays a little bit awake while the body is paralyzed. And you're paralyzed because you've got to protect yourself to the activity of the frontal cortex in sleep. And that's why you're paralyzed. Everybody's always paralyzed in every REM cycle they ever go through. But when you're slightly conscious for this, you are blending the two worlds. I think that the reason why people think there's a boogeyman sitting on their chest isn't because there's something dark and nefarious in the room. I think there's just multidimensionality in the room, which I think is expansive and glorious. The reason why everybody says, oh, no, it was dark and awful is because they can't breathe and they can't move, right. And they collapse that sensation with the multidimensional perception ability.
Well, and I've often thought too with that, our mind is a scary thing to begin with. And if you don't realize how the body works, that you've lowered your breathing rate, your heart rate, right. you're in this paralyzed position, you wake up a little too quickly, the brain has not stopped putting out that chemical to keep us sedate. That's why you can't take full deep breaths. So it gives us that. And then because we've been subjected to American Horror Story and Nightmare on Elm Street, what may be on the shelf an old bowler hat in the shade, your hypnagogic state there, or hypnopompic state, as you're coming out of this, suddenly sees this, and the brain is still in kind of the dream zone, so it turns into the Hat Man or some demonic force, and then that's why it's usually gone so quickly.
There's a guy I knew 15-ish years ago when I was doing my television show on the SyFy network. He was in the audience, and somehow he and I struck up a conversation. I was so fascinated by what he had to say. I got his information, and we connected, and somewhere I have the taped interview with him. This young guy who was an avid meditator and spiritually, metaphysically astute young man suffered from chronic sleep paralysis, night terrors. And on his own dime, in his own sort of instinct, he said to himself, I can transform this experience because I know it's not real. I know that the darkness and the scariness is not accurate. And what he did was, and it took him about a year to fully do, but when it started to occur, and once he made this decision, that is, he would have a night terror, he would wake up, he'd be paralyzed in bed, and he would simply relax and say to himself, I'm making all of this. I can't remember exactly what he said because it was 15 years ago that I had the interview. But basically the gist of it was he meditated and prayed his way from a terrifying, dark, scary feeling to something that eventually became beautiful, light, and not for nothing, engaged with him in a conscious and erotic fashion that was beautiful to him and satisfying and very sort of fully present, not only in his mental experience, his emotional experience, and his physical experience. And it was anything but the boogeyman. It was actually this beautiful, light, sort of goddessy kind of creature. And I would say it's not even maybe a creature, but some, again, multidimensional energy that's present in the room right now as you and I are talking, but we don't have the capacity to tap into it because we've got this rational mind orienting us to time, space, and identity that doesn't operate under the same laws.
In order to feel comfortable that you're getting a fair price, you need pricing context. Information that empowers you to feel confident. And with TrueCar, you'll see what other people in your local market paid for the car that you want. From there, you can connect with a local TrueCar certified dealer and enjoy a more confident car buying experience. Using TrueCar, you can easily find that car that you want. TrueCar will show you what other people in your area paid for the car you want, and now you know what a fair price is, and you can feel confident about the car that you want to buy. Once you register, you'll see real pricing on actual inventory. This is competitive pricing offered to you only by a TrueCar certified dealer for an actual vehicle on their lot. It's pricing you'll see before going to a dealership so you can feel confident when you show up. With TrueCar, you can connect with a local certified dealer of your choosing so you can enjoy a quick, easy buying experience. TrueCar customers are more likely to enjoy a faster buying process when they connect with TrueCar certified dealers. And TrueCar users save an average of over $3,000 off MSRP. Think about that for a second. $3,000 off MSRP. That's a lot of money for the holidays. TrueCar shows their customers all of their available incentives before they arrive at the dealership. Over 3 million cars have been sold to TrueCar users by the TrueCar Certified Dealer Network. And there are over 13,000 TrueCar Certified dealers nationwide. So there's a dealer right near you. When you're ready to buy, visit TrueCar to enjoy a more confident car buying experience. Some features are not available in all states.
A fascinating discussion. Dr. Michael Lennox, our guest, as we talk about Dreams, Llewellyn's Little Book of Dreams. That's the new book out by Dr. Michael Lennox. We have a link for it up on our site. You can find it and follow along as well. These, we'll kind of dip back into some of this, and then of course, I'm going to throw out some of the atypical dream scenarios people have wanted me to ask you about as the show progresses. But if you can answer me about this too, since we're kind of talking about these weird states of sleep and the hypnagogic, hypnopompic states and the possibility of consciousness coexisting in many different realms all at once. There's a phenomena that I just learned about called micronaps. And I don't know if you're familiar with this or if this is just a new trending title for it. I was driving home. I host Coast to Coast AM from time to time. And I was driving home 4:30 in the morning, and I was awake, fully conscious, and all of a sudden I jerked the wheel like I'd nodded off, but my eyes never closed. I never did. And Tim, my co-host, said, I just read an article about this, and he shot me this article that talked about these micro naps where your brain has said, I've had enough. Whether you close your eyes or not, we're going to sleep. And it's kind of these quick jolts, moments when you're dipping in and out. Is that something that you're familiar with?
Well, I'm not familiar with it, but I will say something that I am familiar with, which I think what this must be, a phenomenon connected to the idea. First, I'll describe this way. When we lose sleep and we make it up the next night, there's only one stage of sleep that we actually make up, and that's the REM cycle. We don't spend any more time in any of the other stages of sleep. But if we miss one night, we'll stay in REM longer. Now, REM typically takes a good 60 to 80 minutes to get into the first REM cycle when you first go to sleep at night. It's a little faster as the night progresses, but it's the only stage of sleep that is absolutely necessary for brain functioning. So one phenomenon that does happen that I am aware of is that there are times when, if the brain is very tired, and I'm thinking filled with metabolic waste, you can lie down on your couch for what is ultimately a 5, 10, 15-minute nap and dream, because you're slamming through these 5 stages of sleep and into REM sleep. What I suspect you're describing is something that, because we're more, I think, we're more savvy, technically savvy about what's going on with the brain. I'm guessing that the brain can do this in a millisecond if it needs it. Because if you don't, I mean, if the brain is not cleared out and clean, we are in danger. That's like a literal danger. Both not only because you're not functioning well and you'll bump into the furniture, but eventually all that metabolic waste can lead to illness and death. So I'm guessing that what you described in your car was that in the span of what was probably only a second or two, your system probably slammed you into REM sleep. And in the process of doing so, you probably cleared out just enough metabolic waste from your brain system so that you could wake up and function at a slightly more alert and effective level.
I want to get into some of the paranormal aspects of dreams. And I understand you're a psychologist, so I'm curious, first of all, do you have a belief in aspects of the paranormal, the supernatural?
I am first and foremost a spiritual teacher. When I describe myself or introduce myself to people, I introduce myself as a spiritual teacher. Psychologist comes second. I am more interested in encouraging people to embrace the metaphysical aspects of life and consciousness than anything else. So the idea that I have a DR in front of my name and that I have this title that I can claim because I did a lot of work for a couple of years back a while ago is less about what my actual life and teaching is about. So my love and passion for dreams and dream work is very much about the paranormal, the mystical, the superconscious, and what I believe happens to a person in their day-to-day life experience when they live in a world that recognizes and acknowledges that there's way more going on here than what we can perceive with our puny little minds. We have more grace, we have more acceptance, we have more joy, we have more serenity when we live in alignment with the greater aspects of self that are absolutely mysterious.
I love that that's your angle and aspect on it. So I'm going to ask you to put the metaphysical aspect aside for just a moment. Okay. And speaking to the psychological side, okay, when it comes to grieving and what's known in the paranormal field as dream visitations, the brain is a tricky thing, and the mind and consciousness is very interesting, to say the least. We process grief and loss in profound ways. Do you believe psychologically first, and then we'll go into the spiritual side, but on the psychological end, when people are having these vivid, lucid dreams where they're able to speak one-on-one with someone dead and they're conscious of it during that time, psychologically, does science look at this in the principles of this is just the grieving process of the brain?
Yes, the scientist would say it's a simple affect or artifact of the grieving process, or to fulfill that wish to be connected to the lost love. And so the dream is satisfying that. I don't believe that for a second, though.
All right, but that is the psychological aspect from the science community.
Absolutely.
Now, when it comes to, and we have to take a break in a few moments, but when we come back, I have a few letters from listeners that we approached last Monday, a week ago, and I told them that I'd bring them out to the Dream Doctor when we had you on today to discuss, because I'd like your aspect on this. I've personally had a dream visitation, and I've had family members and friends with these dream visitations, and these dreams are more precise and detailed than any other dream, and it's something so conscious and so precise that I can remember it better than an actual moment in reality. You know, I mean, it's not a mundane moment. This was, I remember it better than actual conversations with my grandfather. That's how specific this moment was. So to me, those are the kind of the benchmarks, the watermarks we're looking for when people are wondering if they've had a dream visitation. And I know my daughter, her adopted mother passed away a few years ago. She's been waiting for some kind of sign, and we've spoken about dream visitation, and she has told me dreams that she's had that I've been very, in my opinion, and again, you know, I'm just dad and you know, I'm in the paranormal, so am I just trying to make her feel good or not? But from your perspective, if you're having conversation and conscious conversation that this person is deceased and that you're having this conversation with them through that whole deal, do you believe that there is more of a metaphysical prospect to that, and it is not just the grieving process of the brain? That may be what opened the chemical door to let this happen, but do you believe from the metaphysical and spiritual side, we are truly communicating with the dead or the spirit world in those moments?
Absolutely. One of the things that makes me pretty certain of this is that if this were coming from the grieving function, then anybody who was grieving would be likely to have such an experience, because if you're going to correlate this kind of dreaming with a grieving process, I can't tell you how many people I have heard over the years who have lost somebody dear to them and are in grief because they haven't had one.
Right.
Okay, so there's that. Let's just put that on the chalkboard for a moment and say it's not an equal sum game. Just because you're grieving doesn't mean you're going to have one of these experiences. And I've heard dozens of hundreds, at least, people say, I wish I had one. The other thing is, as you describe, there's a simplicity and a focus to what I would call a visitation experience that is absolutely antithetical to what dreams typically feel like. Dreams are chaotic, dreams are random, dreams move around, dreams make, no sense out of sensical things and turn things upside down. And that's the nature of dreams. It's one of the ways we know we're having one. And visitation dreams are usually singular in their setting. They don't move around from place to place. They take place in one place. Very often in the room that they are, that the dreamer is sleeping in. If not, it might be a room that is typical for the person who is appearing in the dream. It's the kitchen, or it's a field, or some place singular and simple. Very often there are no words spoken, but there's a sense of meaning or okayness or love that is emanating from the visiting, individual. Mm-hmm. And if there's conversation, it's usually very, again, singular, simple, and concise, and tends to connect to the idea that all is well. Now, I just heard that so many times that at the end of the day, that's an empirical study. What does an empirical study require? It requires a good large sample and repeated results.
The idea, too, that we may be revisiting past lives. I have dreams personally, and since I've opened up about them on the air over the years, I get letters about it all the time. I have dreams where I will be going about doing something mundane, raking the yard, driving in the car. I'll catch a view of myself reflected in the window or mirror, and it's not me. It's like an episode of Quantum Leap. Mm-hmm. I'm in it, and I'm looking at myself, and I'm like, hey, who's that good-looking fella? Where did I go? And it's, a totally different look, totally different time and era sense to it. What do you believe about the reincarnation aspect? Can we dabble back into the possibilities or probabilities of past lives in a dream form?
I absolutely, if it were the Inquisition once again, and I was going to be potentially strung up for having beliefs of this nature, I would just light the funeral pyre myself. That's how certain I am of my general belief that we are connected to each other and outside of the boundaries of time. When it comes to what it is structured as, I couldn't possibly say, nor do I believe that anyone can say. I believe that anyone who says this is how it happens is ultimately describing, in a mythological sense, a mystery that is a mystery. So I have this relationship with the idea of describing it that causes me to always qualify it, to say, I don't know how it works, but I know that it works. So I don't know if I've been other people or maybe I've been everybody, because I believe there's only one energy here. And so either way, whether it's a linear reincarnation model or a kind of expansive matrixy geometrical model, it doesn't matter which one is true. What really matters is both ideas are describing the notion that there's fluidity between consciousnesses that is individual, and it is not limited by time and space, such that things that have occurred long before this version of me as Michael or you as David is touchable. Whether you look in the mirror in the dream and see the guy who's clearly from another lifetime is literally you in a lifetime or simply another lifetime, I couldn't say. But that it's a thing that happens in dreaming, I believe with all my heart. And sometimes it's not because I have some, scientific sensibility about it. There are times when I'm hearing a dream and my response to the dreamer will be, this sounds like a past life. No, I don't know why I'm saying that, but I trust how I work. And how I work is I surrender my listening to the dream and the things that come out of my mouth afterwards. I surrender that process to something that feels bigger than me, that's coming through me as a kind of divine universal wisdom, right? And so if someone tells me a dream and the words, this sounds like a past life, want to fly out of my mouth, I simply let them. Does it mean that it is a past life? I have no idea.
Just throwing this out there, and this may be one of those moments we need to fire up the bong to discuss this deeper, Doc, but it just kind of hit me. How many times have we done something very mundane, driving to work, raking the yard, taking a walk, when all of a sudden it's over and we're like, how did I even get here? Who is driving this car? I'm not there.
That's right.
Wouldn't it be interesting to think that if we do work on energetic principles and wavelengths, and there are people having dreams where they wake up and they're doing mundane things and they're seeing themselves through somebody else's eyes and face, wouldn't it be interesting if during those moments it's like a waking sleep for that person as well? And
I love that
our
idea.
Consciousness may be cohabitating with this person because we're resonating at the same wavelength or pattern. And maybe the reason we're seeing this and we continued raking and finishing doing because that's what we thought we were supposed to. But the fact is, it was happening in real time somewhere else along on this great big globe of ours.
What I love about that example as a possibility isn't crunching through the idea of, is that true? Because the bottom line is, we'll never know.
Right.
But that idea that you described, as fantastical as it sounds, matches feelings that I have had, that multitudes of humanity have had about this mystery that we live in. And that interests me. Like that, I think, is a sacred act to ruminate over the possibilities that exist when you consider that there's this one consciousness, this one unity consciousness that we are each individualized expressions of. And if that's true, and we are all connected on some fundamental energetic level, why not have it be more fluid? Certainly, we create stories that exemplify that, and we love them. We love those stories in our media, in our books, in our movies, in our television shows that show this as a possibility. And why does it excite us? For those that it excites, I think it excites us because it vibrates closer to the truth with a capital T than some idea that we're all separate, living in this sort of, horizontal world where we're bumping into our separateness and it's painful.
All right, we need to take a quick break. We've got much more to cover and a lot of great topics, plus a couple of your emails. We'll let the doctor dissect you and figure out what the hell is wrong with you people, and we'll be back with that in just a few moments. You're listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.
Beyond the Darkness.
We're back. Llewellyn's Little Book of Dreams is the book we're discussing. Dr. Michael Lennox, our guest. And you guys might want to mark this down on your calendar on Friday, October 27th, nightmares. We're going to talk nightmares, and we're going to have the good doctor take your calls on Coast to Coast AM, the best in overnight talk radio. I'll be hosting that night. And we want to open up phone lines to you to give you the chance. If you are being plagued by nightmares, you're having ghostly visitations, maybe alien encounters in your home, in your dreams, you're astral projecting, you want help and understanding, well, we have the guy to answer these questions or do his best. Dr. Michael Lennox will be my guest on October 27th, Friday, so make sure you mark that on your calendars and come back. Tonight we're talking about some of the different aspects of dreaming and these dream visitations that we just talked about are so important to people. And I'm curious, what do you think from the metaphysical aspect? Why is it that two people that love the same person the same way and they lose that person, one of them will have a dream visitation, the other will not? What kind of advice do we give to the person that did not so that they don't feel like a failure or maybe they weren't loved enough? And I don't mean to sound flippant about that, but that's been one of the most soul-crushing questions I get from listeners because they just want to know why they haven't had that experience.
You know, I believe that everything unfolds for our benefit. It's one of the things that I tell people when they have a dream that's really disturbed them. I say, everything that happens in your dream experience, in your unconscious experience, is for your benefit. It hasn't come to frighten you or harm you or limit you. It's actually come to make you bigger, better, and more conscious. So if that's true about any sort of dreaming experience, then maybe this is true about visitations. Maybe a visitation experience is something that has benefit to it, that is bigger than the benefit of your sad heart that wants to have the connection. And so I've heard this said. I don't know if this could be codified as true or not. I have certainly heard it said that if a visitation happens, it's because there is some piece of information or wisdom or need for that connection to occur that's happening at the soul level. And that transcends something that might be happening at the personal level. And so that the person who gets the visitation, there's some need or unfinished business or something that comes as a result of that is a bigger issue than simply the desire to have it. Maybe the person who wishes for it is established and connected in the love bond enough that the visitation doesn't need to occur when you're comparing side by side. Well, why you get it and why didn't you? That the one who got it needed it at a soul level, and the one who didn't, the connection was powerful enough.
We're getting the old Smothers Brothers routine thought, right? Mom always loved you best.
That's right.
But it truthfully may be that the reason you didn't have that connection was because the soul connection was already so strong. And I ask people that. I had a great relationship with my mother, so much so that nothing was ever left unsaid. I would love for a dream visitation. I have not had a true one yet. I would love to have that bolt of lightning or the tap on the shoulder, the whisper in the ear, but I've not had that yet. And I've often wondered, is it because I just have such a deep resonating connection with her in life and we did all and said all that there's nothing more to say at this point? And then for people that don't have that, I often ask, well, okay, your brother had the dream visitation. What was your relationship? What was his relationship like with your mother? And sometimes they're like, well, they'd fought and this. All right. And did that dream visitation come and clear the air? Yeah. And what about yours? Did you have the same kind of tempestuous relationship? No, we had a great relationship. I said, well, see, I think that's your aspect. The true gift is you didn't need her to come back to you because you did and loved and lived the way you should. And it was all done in this lifetime.
One of the things I think you're speaking into is the notion that the connection that we're talking about That connection exists. It's not, the dream isn't the connection. The connection exists. The dream is evidence of the connection. And so perhaps the person who receives the visitation is in need of the evidence of the connection.
Right.
And when the connection is not hindered or hampered by regret and limitation and fear and resentment and separation, that's the person who needs the evidence of the greater connection.
With that said, let's take a look at this email. And I know what information and insights Tim and I gave with absolutely no psychological background, but I'd love to hear your take on this.
Sure.
This was an email sent to me a week ago. Dave, I heard you talk about dream visitations recently, and I have a question that I hope you can answer. My mom passed a few days before Thanksgiving back in 2009. Since then, I'll occasionally have a dream where she is alive in the dream, but she's not around. Sometimes she has abandoned me, my father, and my brother. At other times, she's just not around. I've always assumed that the dreams where she's abandoned us means that some part of me is blaming her for dying and leaving me in charge for caring for my father, who's a disabled vet, and my adult brother, who's autistic. Could it be something else? Is she or something trying to send me a message that I'm just too dense to understand? And that's from Brian.
What's interesting to me about Brian's mother is she sounds like she was a supreme caretaker, and that she had individuals in her life that really needed her to show up to that gift of caretaking.
Mm-hmm.
Caretaking is something that we all have within us that we are at varying degrees of good at self-care. But sometimes we abandon ourselves and we don't give ourselves good self-care. I'm going to go with that. When this dream comes for this dreamer, it's a beautiful symbolic representation that they have abandoned themselves with regard to putting their own needs first and taking care of themselves in a way that actually is going to help them care for others, as opposed to really having anything to do with mom literally.
Right. In this fact, I think Tim and I just said this may be just part of the psychological aspect of grieving, and you're having these dreams because you do feel abandoned. And it's not that she's legitimately abandoned you, but it's your own grieving process trying to deal with this loss and maybe feeling overwhelmed in life from what is left on your plate.
What we together exemplified something that I call the inner circle of interpretation and the outer circle of interpretation. In the inner circle, the only thing that counts is the dreamer, and every character in the dream reflects an aspect of them, and therefore mother in that inner circle of interpretation isn't literal mother, but the caretaking mother inside of them that either shows up, to give good self-care or doesn't, and they're in, a state because they're not, taking care of themselves. And then the outer circle of interpretation is when the dream content is reflecting relationships that actually exist in the dreamer's life, where what you described is a perfect interpretation of that dream from the outer circle's perspective. Both are absolutely valid interpretations. One looks at only the inner landscape of the dreamer, and the other one looks at the inner and the outer landscape of the dreamer. I always go to the inner circle because that's just what I do. So that when you presented what you did and what you guys put together when you heard this dream makes complete sense to me if you take into consideration the outer circle of what the dreamer is experiencing. I think it's a grieving process dream where now and then we have to sort of move in and out of feeling like we are good with the loss and feeling like we are not good with the loss.
All right, our next letter, and this one's a little more rich and weird, so let me cover this. And I'm hoping to remember why I wanted to save it for the dream doctor. So, hi, Dave and Tim. Hope you're both well. I thought I'd share this story with you. It's not actually mine, but my brother's. He's always been more spiritually in tune than I am, much to my annoyance, but sometimes when he tells his stories, I'm glad it's he and not me that they happen to. I know that he's always been very spiritually open, and I know that he would like some answers regarding what happened to him. So if you have any of the listeners have any ideas or can put him in touch with someone that can help, please do and let me know. This is his story. I had a similar experience to this when I was in the States back in 2003. Coincidentally or not, I had just got back from another trip to the United States, a holiday, visiting the extraterrestrial highway, Rachel, the little alien, the black mailbox, etc. And on this trip, it's something I've always wanted to take. The trip was great and just perfect for a couple of UFO nuts. We were seemingly buzzed twice by a jet plane, saw a cloud form over nothing on Groom Lake, a cloud that seems to have lights in it. And on top of this, a 40-mile car journey back to the ET highway from Rachel took only 10 minutes. This was after the second buzz by the F-22. Was this a case of missing time, perhaps? I was coming back from home a couple of days. It was late, around 12 to 1 a.m., when I started to hear strange noises around the house, things dropping and falling, but I couldn't quite work out where they were coming from. Then, all of a sudden, a feeling of dread came over me. And I had a strong sense not to go upstairs. My wife and I sleep on the middle floor, my kids on the top, so of course ignored this feeling and just went to check on them. Everything was fine. I thought maybe the kids have knocked something over from their bedside table, accounting for the noises, but everything was in place. I kissed the kids, came down and thought about that, and thought it was weird and fell asleep. After a while, I thought I was dreaming, as I saw myself in bed. I sensed something was above me, not an object, but a large black mass. Now this caused me to wake. As I started to come round, there was a ringing in my ears which got louder and fast. At this point, my arms felt like they were floating, and then my shoulders and torso started to lift toward the mass, as if I were being pulled. I couldn't move anything except my eyes. All I could think was, do not go upstairs. So I resisted the pull. Was this the actual reason for the feeling of dread earlier in the evening, that the upstairs I feared was not in my house, but wherever this mass was attempting to take me? I hit the bed and woke with full body movement, the ringing still in my ears, which by now was incredibly loud and very painful. As stated before, it was so similar to an experience I had when I was in the States in 2003, except that that time I don't remember my arms and torso being pulled. So that's the story. Any ideas? And that's the long and short of that story. What do you make of that? He wakes up to feel, or while still in the sleep-like state, sees this black mass pulling and drawing him up. And when he wakes into what he believes is consciousness, his body is being lifted by the arms and torso toward this thing.
While you were reading the email, and I think by the second time you said something about I was afraid to go upstairs, I had the thought before you actually, he actually said this himself, that the upstairs notion wasn't literal to the home, that it was the sense of above him. In fact, I would say, let's just say for the sake of this conversation, that there was some coalesced, constellated energy above him that he perceived when he was in the sleep state, and what was clearly a bit of a hypnopompic state. I don't think that presence, that energy, was not there when he wasn't sleeping. It was there. And it was, in some parlance of description, above him. So that the sense of don't go upstairs wasn't about climbing to the third floor of the house. It was that above him was an energy that was not of a light quality. There are lots of shamanistic tales. There are Bible stories. There are paranormal mythologies that all talk about what happens when we face something shadowy, that the shadow has this tempting quality and it draws us toward it. And I think this was the experience of that there's some energy. I can't describe what it is. I can only agree that it is. So I would never dismiss it. I would never poo-poo it and say, oh yeah, that was just your imagination, which is of course what the scientists would say. I also wouldn't go so far as to name it or to say that this was, an alien abduction,
right.
In process, because I don't know. So I never stand in declaring a knowledge of something that I don't have any capacity to know. But if the dreamer describes it, I buy it. And what I believe about energies that I think are commonly called entities, I don't think they have consciousness that's human. Human consciousness has a kind of, predatory nature. People who are bad will run around and go, I'm going to get you, or I'm going to get you. I don't think that dark cloud had a consciousness that says, I'm going to get you, or I'm going to get you. I just think it's a low vibration that is trying to attract other low vibrations. And the pull toward it, the sense of being lifted toward it, is a physicalized sensation of a heavy, low, dark, vibratory experience in the interdimensional landscape that was attracting the part of your writer, your dreamer, that had enough low vibration in him to be pulled toward it. But there wasn't so much of that darker, lower, heavier vibration in him that he got pulled further or engulfed by it, or that it attached itself to him.
All right, that's fair enough. Yeah, I follow you on that.
You follow me?
Yes.
That's my 2 cents about that kind of energy.
Dr. Michael Lennox, our guest, and it is Llewellyn's little book of dreams that's out. We have a link to that, and as a matter of fact, we want to thank all of you for listening to the show and supporting us through our advertisers. And one way that you can do that is by visiting podcast1.com. Then click on the Killer Deals link. Scroll down till you see the Beyond the Darkness banner. Click on that, and you'll see all the advertisers that we talk about on the show. And you'll see all the specials, the links, and everything that you possibly need. But on our Amazon link, when you click that, it takes you directly to our storefront. That's all of the guests' books that you hear on the show. If they have books, DVDs, anything along that nature, we will have links to them right on that site. So please go check it out. We also have a great collection of apparel, ghost hunting equipment, and a lot of different things that Tim and I handpick and think are pretty cool. So you can go check it out for yourselves right there. And that's just a great way to help support the advertisers that support this show and keep it ad-free as much as it can be and give you free downloads and availability to the show on a regular basis. All right, Doctor, let's throw out some key pieces people are really talking a lot about, and these are some recurrent things that show up in nightmares and in dreams. And can you give me a little insight on, let's start with this, the new Stephen King movie, It is out. Clowns seem to be prevalent in people's dreams. They're terrified of them. What does it mean in interpretation of dreams when a clown is in your dream?
I think that the freaky thing about clowns is that you can't trust the faces that they're presenting. There's this painted affect of a smile, and it's false. And so we've created in our media this rich sort of symbolism of clowns as evil. And I think the reason why it's easy to have done that is because there is something a little disconcerting about looking at a face that is painted in a smile, but that can't be ultimately trusted. And so there's a long legacy or history of not trusting that image. And therefore, and what do clowns do in circus lore is they're mischievous. A lot of clown play is slapstick and attacking in nature, though it's, we're not talking to clowns here. We're talking about the energy behind them. So I think that's why clowns are easy targets for creepiness. Right. Because there's an inauthenticity built into them.
So what can that tie to are we dealing with something in our real life that the clown is representing in our dreams?
Well, since you brought in the clown through the lens of Stephen King's It, one of the beautiful themes that is presented in that story is that this energy is feeding on fear. And the clown's initial presence is to be attractive to children. So it's the smile of the clown is at first authentic, but the modus behind it is nefarious. And so I think that in it of itself is the idea of I live in an unsafe world that I cannot trust. The clown then embodies that idea of not being able to trust something that's being put in front of you that's ultimately inauthentic.
All right. What about this kind of a myriad of different ones, but they all seem to have the same feel? People that have dreams where their teeth or fingers, toes, or arms are dropping off.
Well, let's start with teeth. What do teeth do for us? They help digest food, so they sustain and nurture us. They also attract love. If you smile, you get a smile back. So right there, teeth fulfill a wonderful function of sustaining you both on a physical and on an emotional level. So to lose your teeth is to lose that capacity to feed and love yourself. And so there's a kind of an insecurity built in to the image of losing your teeth. And that's why I think it's like the fifth or sixth most common recurring dream. And it usually happens when the dreamer is feeling insecure about some aspect of their life, and most particularly probably connected to their word or their communication or the power of their voice, because the mouth is where we speak from. Digits, that's interesting. I haven't heard that quite as much, but it's a similar kind of thing. Hands and fingers are about our capacity to create. And so if we lose them, we are losing our capacity to do things and to be dexterous and to be, to have facility.
What about encountering people with empty eye sockets?
Well, the eyes are the windows of the soul. I think that, what is a fundamental fear that people have about their own, humanity is, do they have depth? Do they have a soul worth saving, if you will? And so I think that a figure in a dream that is eyeless and soulless is a perfect shadow character of the worst thing that could be true of a human being would be to be alive and have no soul. And so that's a wonderful nightmare image.
What about hair? And I don't mean to laugh. It's weird because this was brought up to me a long time ago, and then I had two dreams with it afterwards, and I couldn't tell if it was because it sounded so obscure and somebody put it into my thoughts, or if this has some tie to it. Hair growing off the tongue in your dreams, where you feel like you're pulling it off like you would an eyebrow, and you feel it connected. What the hell does that mean? I had that twice now, and I'm like, and I remember thinking during the dream, oh man, I remember hearing about this, but I can't, and I couldn't remember what it stood for. But what does that mean?
Well, I love the idea that you had the dream after the image was planted for you, because I think that is a beautiful exemplar of the fluidity of the unconscious, that it does borrow imagery in that way, that we are sparked by things we've seen and heard and done and said and movies we've watched. But if you think about, again, anything that centers on the mouth is ultimately going to be about a person's communication. You're a man who is voice-centered. So it's all about the voice. You're using it on a regular basis, and your efficacy is measured by what is coming out of your mouth, what the sounds that your tongue is capable of making. And so hair, where it oughtn't be, that feels like it needs to be pulled out, is like an obstacle to clear communication. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had the capacity to go back and really nitpick through your life the day of or the day before the night that you had that dream, that something might have happened that tripped you up in your sense of being an effective communicator. And then your unconscious says, oh, I remember that image what's-his-name told me about. Let's use that to express this sense of befuddlement in being clear with my voice.
Now, if we're having nightmares, I mean, all right, people have fears of snakes, people have fears of spiders, people have fears of zombies and clowns. If these things are appearing in the dream of one that has that fear to begin with, does it necessarily have to be some kind of Freudian meaning, that there's a double meaning to this, or could it just be you're afraid of this and maybe your day's out of whack and you're feeling like you're running scared and afraid, and your subconscious is releasing your Wendigo, it's releasing your monster to you?
Well, I love that you use the phrase, your day was out of whack. That is often enough for the unconscious to send something up to express that kind of frustration. Because in the day doesn't go so well in your conscious mind, and you can just call it a bad day. But down in the unconscious, there are fearful places where you're going to die homeless and alone. And so the dream will often go to the most convenient fearful image for someone. That's why it's not uncommon to hear someone say, oh, yes, I always have a dream of sharks. Yes, I'm afraid of sharks, but yes, I'm always having a dream about a shark chasing me. That's because the brain and the mind and the unconscious mind is economical in nature. It just says, oh, he's afraid again. Let's throw him that shark image. There's wonderful imagery in that movie In and Out that or Inside Out or Upside Down. What's that movie, the animated movie with a girl and her 5 unconscious
voices? Inside Out, I think, or something like that.
Out.
Right, yes.
Wonderful, I think, representation of the unconscious at work in just like those moments. Oh, she's afraid in life. Let's get that fearful, and I think there's a clown in that movie, by the way. Let's get that frightening image because it's convenient for the unconscious mind to use it to signal that the day has been off. And in order for that person to wake up the next day and do it again with courage and fortitude fully intact, the dream of the shark or the gun or the anything is actually helping. I know that seems counterintuitive because it's disturbing, but it's actually giving the soul a chance to breathe into the thing called fear so they can wake up the next day and be courageous.
Help us make some dreams come true. It's that time of year, folks. It's our Halloween for Hunger campaign, and we need your help. We're working alongside with the Tom Bernard Show. You can hear me on the TomBernardShow.com every Tuesday as I sit in and talk about everything from the paranormal to pop culture with Tom Bernard and the cast of his show. But Tom Bernard has sided with me, Coast to Coast AM. We are raising money for Second Harvest Heartland. And this is a great form of helping neighbors in our towns and communities here in the heartland of America. The money doesn't go to other countries. It stays right within our boundaries. And their buying power is such that every $1 delivers 3 meals to people in need. Let's end some nightmares for people starving in our communities. And we can do that by making a very simple donation. And trust me when I say there is no too small a donation. $1, $5, $20, $100. Everything helps. $1 will help feed someone in need for an entire day. And if all the listeners of our show, the over 300,000 downloads of this episode we get, if each one of you just kicked in $1, we would be able to make miracles happen. So please email me, Dave@darknessradio.com. Dave@darknessradio.com, and I will be sending you a link to the Halloween for Hunger campaign. Now, this week, I'm out of the country. I'm in England. The show was pre-recorded last week, but I will get back to those emails the minute I get back. Hopefully, we'll also have the banner up on our site at darknessradio.com where you can just click the banner and it'll take you and you can make donations right there. But help us end hunger and help feed those of our friends, relatives, and loved ones right in our own community by supporting us for our Halloween for Hunger campaign, which has begun. Again, email me and I'll send you the link, or go check darknessradio.com for updates and to make donations directly off the banner there. Dr. Michael Lennox, our guest this evening. I know the end is coming soon. Just a few more little bits to throw at you. All right. We talked kind of about the hypnagogic and hypnopompic states, these moments of awake and going into sleep and coming out of sleep where reality and dream world seem to touch. What do you make of encounters in the night with alien beings in the room, especially when they seem to be something that's there and gone within 20 to 30 seconds? Would that lend to believe that that was probably more of that hypnagogic, hypnopompic state and the mind melding between awake and dream world at that moment? Or are we also open at that point? Because if I understand this right, the pituitary gland does secrete basically DMT at different times during the day and night, and that may be either opening up our third eye or affecting the way our consciousness accepts our surroundings. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there is research that shows that DMT in constructed DMT is opening people up to experience consciousnesses that are thought to be extraterrestrial. Again, I can't speak to whether that's true or not true, but there is a connection between a stimulated pituitary and this notion of connecting to consciousnesses that appear to be, that seem to be, that are reported to be from other places in our universe. And there's also research that shows that the pituitary, without assistance, is also, yes, releasing this chemical at different times during the sleep cycle. And again, back to the idea of what happens in the hypnopompic and gogic state, where there's an openness to being able to perceive stuff that I think is probably present at any given time. So that when a person reports having this experience of connecting to something that they sort of declare feels like an extraterrestrial, consciousness, I'm inclined to say, well, why not? Why not? There's more in the mystery than there is in the air quotes reality. And I think that there are energies out there that are perceivable.
Okay. That's fair enough. And just in wrapping up here, what about dreams? Can they really answer our questions, our waking problems? Should we go to bed with a thought on our mind to solve a problem? I know that'll keep most of us awake at night, but will the brain truly work to resolve that, or is that just an old wives' tale?
Well, there are certainly stories of people who claim to have worked literal problems out, whether it's in the world of inventions or other complex mechanizations of the mind, by having a dream that sort of gave them the answer that they were seeking. If that happens to a person, amen. In my world, what I teach absolutely is the art of petitioning the dream state for help and assistance in challenges that are maybe a little bit more humanistic and a little bit more interactional, a little bit about, I'm having a relationship challenge, or I'm having a what do I do with my life challenge, or I'm having a, oh my God, this depression won't leave me challenge. And I would invite people who I'm either speaking to or teaching or working with to go to sleep and before bed say, look, I'm having this issue. Send me a dream that's going to help me work this out a little bit. And the dreams will provide answers and information and wisdom and guidance. It may not be literal, but it's certainly nurturing.
Can we control our dreams? And is there a quick tip that you can give our listeners, an exercise for them to try to use so that they can feel like they're more in control when they're having nightmares or bad dreams?
Absolutely. There's an enormous amount of information out there in the form of, in the realm of lucid dreaming. This is called lucid dreaming. The very simple lucid dreaming that everybody's probably had at least one experience of is that notion of being in a dream and going, oh my God, I think I'm dreaming. That's a lucid dream. It is definitely possible to wake the conscious mind up in the dream state and do it in a manner that we're going to call controlling your dreams, or at least entering the dream state. One of the simplest techniques is to train yourself or declare, to say out loud to yourself, I'm going to look at my hands in my dreams, and then look at your hands while you're waking up. So what you're doing is you're creating an image on your retina that the brain is recording, that it's going to look at again during the sleep time, because we've already made that clear that the brain has to review everything it has experienced during the waking life to either turn it into a memory or discard it. So creating a visual image on a regular basis of looking at your hands is a wonderful way to train yourself to do so in the dream state. And the idea is, if you're intent on this and you don't give up before the miracle happens, there'll come a night when you'll be in a dream, you'll kind of have this lucid moment. You'll look at your hands and you'll be like, oh my God, I'm dreaming.
Fantastic stuff. And today is still a day of nightmares. Remember, it's True Crime Tuesday. And tonight we're talking with Neil Story, Rippers, Demons, and the Butchers of Britain. True crime historian Neil Story is back. And tonight we turn our focus to some of the most brutal, unusual, and disturbing crimes from scary old England. Neil digs deep to unearth dark aspects of the Rippers of England, crime-solving and revenge-filled ghosts, demon barbers, butchers, and more, plus some incredibly mind-numbingly stupid criminals that have been at play the last week. That's all today on True Crime Tuesday. Remember, you can subscribe to that by going to darknessradio.com. Click on the True Crime Tuesday banner. For $5 a month, you get 4 brand new 90 to 120-minute episodes of the best in true crime talk radio. Plus, you get the Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals, I Knew a Murderer, and more. That's all you have to do. Sign up for that, $5 a month, and everybody that signs up between now and my birthday, November 22nd, is automatically added into a drawing. We'll be giving away 3 one-year subscriptions. Since my birthday falls right before Thanksgiving, it's a day of giving thanks and giving gifts to you, my loving audience. So go ahead and subscribe now. $5 a month is all it takes. And remember, if you don't like it, you can always cancel. It's a month-by-month service. So I think if you enjoy what you hear on Beyond the Darkness, you're going to love what you hear on True Crime Tuesday. Go sign up for that. Make it a part of it. And remember to check out our guest's website. We'll have that up on the site as well. MichaelLennox.com. He's got the brand new book out called Llewellyn's Little Book of Dreams. He also has the book Dream Sight, which is a dictionary and guide for interpreting any dream. We're going to have another visit from the good doctor when I visit with Coast to Coast AM on October 27th. We'll be talking more about nightmares. We'll be listening to your calls. You can email me, and I might read some of those emails on air with the good doctor. Just keep them concise. Don't give me a 14-page email. Give me the bite-sized portion of, I'm having dreams about blah, blah, blah. What does this mean? And we'll try to get those emails answered during that show. You can always send those to dave@darknessradio.com, and go check out darknessradio.com. Click on the Killer Links deal, and you'll find our Amazon homepage. You'll be able to find links to all of the books that we mention on the show. Dr. Lennox, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening.
Great to be here. Thank you, Dave.
It's been a real pleasure. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be talking about the ghost studies, and Brendan Masulo is our guest. Later on in this week, pyramids and the aliens. Some very strange messages have been uncoded and found with Gary Parker. He'll be here to talk to us about that, so make sure you check that out. That's what's going on this week on the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.